Now, Paris, or an associate of Paris, purchased her in Barbados when she was a teenager and brought her to Boston in 1680. In November of 1689, Samuel Paris moved Tituba and his family to Salem after he was appointed the new minister of Salem Village. Now, in many scholarly treatises, as I said, she's referred to as black or half-breed, but the court documents at the time referred to her as an Indian woman, which I don't like using that word in that way. I prefer indigenous. Indigenous is a better word, and it doesn't feel so colonizer-y, if that's...
That's a word. Absolutely,
yeah, okay.
That's the term.
Probably not, but I'll take it.
I take it. I know what it means. It works.
So over a decade later, Tituba was one of the first women to be accused of witchcraft during the hysteria of 1692. Now, some suggest she was named a witch because she allegedly practiced voodoo, but there's no evidence for this, certainly not in the court records. And so that we have no evidence that she did this. So where the authors come up with the idea that she was practicing voodoo is questionable at best. What they do indicate is that when Paris's daughter Betty and her cousin Abigail started experiencing these fits and whatnot, Tituba and her husband John helped a neighbor named Mary Sidley bake a witch cake, which is basically rye meal and the afflicted girl's urine, and you feed it to a dog, and somehow the dog reveals the name of the witch that bewitched the girls. I'm not sure how this is supposed to work. I'm not sure how you make a cake with urine, but apparently it was a common thing. But the thing is, in the court documents, it makes it seem like it was Mary Sibley sort of directing, and Tituba just doing her usual job of, okay, here's the wheat flour. Betty's peeing in a cup now. We'll get that. She was just there to help. Like, maybe she understood the process, but she certainly wasn't leading it. So afterwards, the girl's symptoms took a turn for the worse. Or if you want to go with what Jeff says, what he says is he thinks the girls were so thrilled that they got attention for doing this that they kicked it up a notch. That's his theory. I don't argue that it's true. I just point it out because it does make a certain amount of sense to me.
Well, and bear in mind too that the patriarchy was big and loud then. Women had no inherent power, no rights. Property rights were minimal, and children had no freedoms, no possessions. The whole imagine, right? And so these girls suddenly were getting attention and were having the ability to direct the activities of adults around them. That's a big deal. That's heady stuff for some kids. And so they're going to lean right in.
Right. And I mean, I don't even completely blame them. I mean, one was 9. 9 is sort of easily corruptible, but innocently so. This is fun, and they don't necessarily think about this is dangerous.
No, they don't understand life and death, I think, absolutely. And also they're being pressured, I think. They're being pressured by their families to not come out as ungodly, as lying. They're being pressured by society around them to allow the machine to crank away. And it's hard to back out. Like even when you're only 9, one of my kids is 9, and once she gets caught in a lie, she just keeps digging that hole. Like, I just want to hand her a shovel and be like, can I help with the hole that you're digging underneath yourself right now? Because you're just digging deeper and deeper. When the correct answer, the smarter answer would be to say, okay, I screwed up. That's not what happens.
Right. Also, you have to understand that their dad was the local minister. And from what I can find out, he had a bit of a temper, or at least was known for one.
There isn't any kids worse than ministers' kids.
And Laura says there's no kids worse than ministers' kids.
Me. I don't know.
So Anyway, so they're interviewing the girls, and the girls point at Tituba, who's a slave, so she has no power. Sarah Good, who's homeless, mostly, and we'll talk about her, but mostly through the augmentations of her stepfather, who was kind of a jerk. And then Sarah Osborne, who was old, and she hadn't been to church in 3 years because she hurt so bad. And when I say old, she was 66, but for the time period, that was pretty old. I mean, life expectancy then was not what it is now. So, but yeah, so those were the three that were picked. And again, to me, this sort of supports the not ergot thing, because they picked the women that they knew they could get away with picking. Like those women didn't really have a chance to defend themselves. They would try, but they didn't really. So, but they arrested these three women, and it would have ended there, but they interviewed Tituba first. And Tituba, I could read you the transcript, I have it, but basically, she goes out of her way to try to save her life. She knows the only way she's going to save her life is to tell these people a story they're going to believe. And they're not going to believe the story of, I just did what Mary Sibley said and gave the dog a rye cake. We just made her a witch cake and I gave it to the dog. That's what happened. Because she has no social standing, and the girls accusing her are the daughters of the minister. So they're believed without even hesitation. So Tituba has to come up with something. And so she basically does what criminals have done, not that she's a criminal, mind you, but what criminals have done for time immemorial, and engages the Saudi defense. Some other dude did it, or in this case, some other woman did it. I guess that's the Saudi defense. I don't know. Anyway, but she points at Good and Osborne as basically the prime movers in this. And so they decide not to kill her. And I mean, she gets creative. She talks about conversations she had with evil pigs, evil dogs and rats, ordered to do their bidding, which wouldn't an evil rat's bidding be bring me cheese? I'm just saying, I'm even an evil rat, bring me cheese. And that dead cat over there. I don't know. I mean, what's an evil pig want?
All I know is what an evil giraffe would do. So since we're in the Eddie Izzard mindset, right?
I'm an evil giraffe.
I eat all the leaves. Yes.
And some animals will die.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah. Well, apparently she didn't talk to evil giraffes. Only Eddie Izzard did. So
that's too bad, really. That would really bring something to the story.
Yeah, because I would like to see the Salem witch trials after the introduction of the evil giraffe. So, and the other thing, nobody knows for sure what religion Tituba practiced. It probably was not voodoo, but it probably also was not Christianity. So she maybe didn't have any fear of going to hell for confessing to being a witch. Whereas the other accused witches absolutely did, because their religion insisted that deals with the devil, which they believed was a real person who walked the planet, were absolutely verboten to Christians. So Tituba, sure, I'm a witch. Whatever you say, I'm a witch. I don't mean to be a witch, whatever. I don't understand your ways or whatever. And so and after a while, like after she'd been in jail a while, Tituba recanted her confession. She said, I didn't do any of that. And they almost didn't notice it. Only Robert Califf made a note of it. And he said that basically Robert or Paris, the minister, beat her and abused her to make her confess. And accuse her sister witches. Basically, he did not want a slave he owned embarrassing him. And so he did everything he could to have her just warmed up for that that hearing and ready to confess. And just, I knew Tituba got a raw deal, but just reading up on it, it made me so mad, because after everything is done, she's left in jail in Boston because Paris won't pay her jail fees.
Yeah, and that's a thing back at the time, and a lot of people got stuck in the jail, even in Salem town. You weren't, it wasn't enough, they didn't feel, to throw you in a horrific, moldy basement where, like, I've seen closets bigger, and I grew up like in trailer parks, and I've seen, you know what I mean? So like my concept of what a closet is pretty small, and these are like, you cannot even sit down on the floor of these. I've seen the footprints of the original, you know, a recreation of the old Salem jail, and like, that's not enough. We're going to lock you in here with the rats, no giraffes, with buckets to relieve yourself in that you have to take out, and you have to pay to get the bucket back. And on top of all of that, you get to pay for your food, and you get to pay for your lodging, and they don't let you out until you've paid for all that. Although how you're supposed to earn money to pay to be released is a little squirrely. Basically, they just want money. They don't care how you get it.
Right. Exactly. And so eventually the jail sold her, and I'm assuming her husband John went with her, but nobody and so she sort of passes out of history at that point, because, you know, she's,
I mean, can you blame her? Like, I'd take off.
Oh no, I don't doubt it. I just, what a cruel way to use somebody, you know, and it floors me. Like, I knew she got a raw deal, but I never knew how raw. Like, I assumed after even when the real court comes in, they're the one who they re-examine Tituba, and they basically write her off as an ignoramus. That's written on the court papers, which just is,
I mean, it's a legal term. It's not an insult. It just means that there's not adequate evidence one way or the other. So it's they don't want to say, not like, now not guilty means either factually innocent, or not enough evidence, or we couldn't get the jury to agree. Right. And at the time, they tried to sort it out more. And so ignoramus was like, there's just not enough evidence. We're not willing to say she's innocent. We're just willing to say they didn't bring enough evidence.
Yeah. So that's Tituba. And talk about someone who just, the process beat the hell out of her. So I want to take a moment for, you know, our sponsors. So we're going to take a moment for a word from our sponsors. So hang on just a second. And since Laura's not here to say it, I'll say it. I feel sponsored. Normally that's Laura's line, but she is indisposed at the moment. She will rejoin us shortly. You know, mom stuff. You know.
I absolutely do. I actually have I never have my phone out, but I do right now, because your listeners may have noticed that at about a minute into recording, it sounded like someone set off cannon fire directly overhead. And it probably wasn't that. It was probably just somebody dropped a backpack or something, but it was directly overhead. So, mom stuff. I'll kill them later. It's fine.
Don't kill them.
Make them wish they were dead.
Yeah. Best way to go.
This brings up Bridget Bishop, the first executed. Now, Bridget Bishop was hanged on June 10th, 1692. Here's the thing. She was often confused for Sarah Bishop, but Bridget lived in Salem town, not Salem village. John Hawthorne, who was the judge, and Jareth Corwin, who was the sheriff or one of the sheriffs, here's the thing with this. I've seen more first names for this court